My name is Veronica Mason. I've just finished a arts law degree at the University of New South Wales. I also just recently finished a 6-month internship at Google, and I will be commencing as a graduate at Baker & McKenzie, where one of my rotations was in their tech practice group. And I've also interned at the Cyberspace Law and Policy community. Yeah.
All right. Tell us about your 6 months at Google.
Yeah, it was very dynamic. It was really interesting. It was a really great way to start my professional career. It was dynamic and totally innovative. There was something new happening every day. And as a legal intern, it was very interesting to be able to take the skills that I learnt from my previous experiences and my experiences at university and then put them into practice. I found that I was thrown with a lot of different questions and a lot of different skills that I never thought that I would need to have. And I think one of the highlights that I had when I was there was learning how to code, which I think is absolutely vital for a lawyer nowadays. And I think that it was an incredibly invaluable experience.
And did you do coding at university?
I didn't do coding at university. My other degree was arts, so I didn't have the opportunity to. But now that I've begun it, I'm definitely going to continue.
And how did you adapt? Were you thrown in at the deep end?
With coding?
Coding.
Yeah, so Google ran coding classes, and so they just did that. It was pretty easy once you started getting going. It was actually really, really fun and really interesting, and I found that it was a really good way to incorporate things that you'd been taught in the law and then being able to put it into code as well. I thought it was really interesting to be able to think in a really different way about how to solve problems by building something out of nothing, and that was really exciting for me as somebody who'd never been able to be exposed to something like coding or learning how to.
Yeah, so were there any aspects of your time at Google which required you to learn something from afresh from the start, which you hadn't actually been taught at university, and what were they, apart from coding?
Pretty much every day I was expected to know something that I hadn't learnt before, or learn something that I hadn't learnt before, whether or not that was content of the law or something technological. So I had to learn, what machine learning was, what AI was, how to fit virtual reality into some of the advice that I was giving my other in-house counsel, different product areas, those sorts of things would come up on a daily basis. And those are definitely not anything that I'd even remotely considered when I was at law school. And so that was very, very different as well. But even from the content as well, I think I didn't touch notes or textbooks that I'd used at university, but I just had to learn really quickly because the law changes so frequently that you just always need to be adaptable to that. And it wasn't necessarily the content that they were interested in. They're obviously interested in the content, but they're also interested in what I thought the answer was. So it was much more of a yes, no, and then explanation versus this is the explanation of the answer, which I was used to in law school.
So looking back on your law course, what do you think the university could have done differently in terms of its curriculum? And can you just explain to us where you thought those gaps, if there were gaps, where they might be?
Yeah, I was really fortunate because when I was studying at university, I really went out of my way to make sure that I had other experiences outside just the classroom. So I was a legal executive at the Children's Cancer Institute, where I drafted a privacy policy, or I was an intern at Cyberspace Law and Policy community, or for one of my electives I took the IT elective, and then I also incorporated other things in my other areas of interest. So for instance, I was interested in international law, and then I incorporated technology into that. So I did a law course on the use of armed force, and then did a thesis in there in the course on cyber warfare, and that was a really interesting way to bring technology into that. So for me, if I hadn't been that interested and really passionate about technology and pursuing that as a profession, I think that there's a lot of scope to be able to develop that. I think that the IT course that I did take was absolutely crucial. It dealt with so many different areas. So, for instance, disruptive technology and startups and the legal issues that those companies face, and that was crucial. In terms of cores, I think the core was incredibly valuable for the advisory skills that I would get and the content skills that I would get, but it wasn't as useful as it could have been to be able to teach me the technology issues that come up with that, for instance, e-commerce, or and especially in the contracts field. So I felt that those were the areas that they could definitely develop on, especially within the course. Something like torts was nowhere near as interesting or as useful to me as the IT course was, and those are the areas that I would really like to see change, because I think that they're talking about what's happening now versus what could be happening in 5 years' time, and then you might not be prepared for the things that are actually going to affect your legal practice when you exit the law school.
But there seems, from what you said, there were courses available to you to undertake to help cater to your interests. Would that be correct?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there were the two primary ones, so the internship and the IT law course, and then in every other way I tried to just find a very obscure way to bring technology into that, but it definitely worked out for that particular purpose, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm very interested in the work that you did, Veronica, at Google. You've now had a taste of working in-house, and I can tell you from personal experience that in-house and private practice, total ends of the poles. What are your expectations, may I ask, for your role at Baker and McKenzie? So you're going to be going into private practice for the first time. What do you think is going to happen there? How do you think you're going to practice law? How do you think technology will play into your practice of law? I'd really be interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I think having in-house experience is just completely different to a firm experience, which I experienced when I was when I was there as a clerk, and I think that it's just made me so much different to how I ever would have begun practicing. So
you're much better now. You've been in-house.
Oh, please.
So in-house clients, they want quick, fast responses.
Quick, fast, and dirty.
Yeah, they don't want you to. They don't want to sit there and explain to them
Correct.
what virtual reality is. They want you to say, okay, well, these are the legal issues that come with that. I think they want quick answers that are founded in good analytical skills and advice, but not the 3 or 4 page memo on why that is so. They trust you enough to do that. I think it's really important to be more of a business partner for them and work towards those common goals of solving their problems. Because
and when you go to Baker McKenzie,
do you
see that changing?
Yeah, so when I go to Baker McKenzie, my ultimate aim would be to be a lawyer that would be able to service their goals very specifically. So answer the questions, have an advisory role, and know exactly what the issues that they're dealing with. Is it software as a service that they're concerned about? What are the issues that this particular client will have, not only now but 5 years' time, and how can we prepare them for that? I think that the legal profession itself is going towards more of an advisory, especially for law firms, advisory role, and I think it's really important that that they're able to keep up with the technology as well as the legal content as well, because that's always in a state of flux.
So in terms of the areas that could be added to the law degree, if I can put technology to one side, because I'm interested in what you were saying about the sort of commercial expectations, being the business partner. Is there certain skills around that you think could be added to the law degree?
Yeah, definitely. I think advisory skills are absolutely key. I think you sort of pick them up when you leave, but I think there's definitely scope within the law, within legal studies, to be able to add those skills about how do you work with partners. I was really lucky that I did a lot of negotiations when I was in university, so I sort of knew how to deal with clients that might not have either the same skill set as me. So, for instance, when I was in Google dealing with engineers, or just trying to find a common ground, and those skills were absolutely crucial for me when I was working in-house. As a in the law school, I think that there's a lot of scope to be able to develop that rather than just sort of learning it as you go. I think coding is really important for legal students. I think you don't necessarily have to know all the languages, but you need to know what they are. There's no point advising Google if you don't know what they do. And I think that there's a lot of scope to know the trends as well.
Do you think the law schools offer sufficient training of business skills themselves? And I ask you that in the context that most of my team I've sent on courses to learn how to read a balance sheet, to learn how to read a profit and loss statement, because that's what our business is about. Do the law schools teach you how to do that, or do you think they should be teaching how to do that?
I don't think they teach you how to do that, and I definitely think there's scope for you to be able to teach that, because whether or not you go in-house, which is a common option for people that are in law firms, or you don't, you are in a law firm, you're faced with those problems every day. Like, if you're going to talk to your client, you need to know what precisely they're dealing with, not only in the tech space, but also with their business. So you need to be able to understand those sorts of things. And then other different clients as well. So startups, for instance, how do you service them without knowing precisely what they're about? And I think those business skills are definitely lost along the way, because you're taught that your specific skill set is very unique in the sense that you'll just be giving legal advice, but that's not the case at all. You're giving a whole range of advice, and maybe 90% of that will be law, maybe 10 will be business. But you have to answer the whole spectrum. You have to answer the CEO when they ask you a certain question, or those sorts of things, and to be able to speak the same language, whether or not that language is coding language or business language or just legal language. That's really important, I think.
Principles can be expensive.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that balance.
What information was available about employment opportunities while you were at law school?
I think that there was a very big focus on clerkships, and I was very interested to go into a law firm and see what it was like. I was very lucky that I was at Baker McKenzie and experienced their technological practice. I don't think that there was a lot of other scope for a lot of other different degrees and degrees of careers, and I think so. For instance, Google came about because I was referred there. Somebody saw it and then said that you'd be wonderful for it, and I applied.
Someone at university, or?
No, well, yes, somebody at university, and then other people outside of university. So a couple of people sent me and referred that ad to me, and that was just by chance. But there was no other focus on what you could possibly do with your law degree that was possibly as highlighted as a clerkship. So, for instance, as a business partner, because I think it's definitely a profession that's changing very, very rapidly, and whether or not that means that the excess of law students might go into a business role, which they can because they have such great and analytical skills. They have this great capacity to read documents and synthesize them. But yeah, if you don't know that that's obviously an option, then actually it causes a lot of stress, especially when clerkships are so challenging to get, and other internships themselves are very competitive. So it's very stressful. But if you have a whole spectrum and a whole skill set that you can go out to the world with, then that's really wonderful, and that gives you a lot of freedom and flexibility.
Any advice that you've got for law students today, and what they should be doing in terms of their careers, or investigating career opportunities?
Yeah, I think not only 5 years when you finish your law degree, but 10 or 15 years in advance. What does that world look like to you, and what is your place in that world, and work towards that. So do you want to go into a law firm? What does that look like for you? How can you add value? How can you add the skills that will be absolutely necessary in 15 years' time versus just a lovely add-on? What sort of things are you interested in, and how can you incorporate things that are changing and developing, because disruptive models are everywhere, and that's a really big part of legal practice, because you have to consider what's happening, whether it's Uber or Airbnb. Those things are really changing the landscape. So I think it's really important for young lawyers and young law students to really consider their options, and there's always possibilities where you think your interests might lie. So always go forward, but always be very aware of what's happening, especially in the technology space, because not only from a business perspective in terms of the people you might be able to service, but also the technology and how fluent you might be able to be in it to be able to add value, because you can save time by just creating something and then saving an hour per day, which is 5 hours a week, those sorts of things. So those are the things that I would recommend for a law student going forward.